Welcome to the Power Factor Show. Episode 165.
The bandwidth for this episode of the Power Factor Show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Firearmsradio.tv.
Sponsored by Taylor Freelance, Rainier Ballistics, Hodgson Powders, and JPL Precision.
So welcome to Power Factor. Today we are going to probably do something, or at least I'm pretty certain we're going to do something.
We're going to try and do something.
We're going to try and do something that has never been done on, as far as I know, and I've looked around in video before. We are going to take apart a Beretta, I'm going to call it a 680X action, 686 specifically, but the design is so similar across the whole entire Beretta product line in terms of over-unders.
As far as you're talking 680s
yeah,
or 692 type.
not the SV10 because that's a different action. But in terms of 682 or 686 or
a DT, or a DT10 or a DT11.
Oh, really? The DT?
No, they're different.
Okay,
they're
right,
totally
right.
different.
692 is the same?
692 is basically, it's got a lot of the same part numbers in it.
Okay, okay.
And that'd be the same as the SV10, which I understand is now discontinued.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've heard rumors of it.
Well, I saw that on our favorite shotgun website. An email allegedly from Joel Etchin Guns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're talking about there is the Beretta SV10 series. Was kind of I kind of wondered why it was out there because the 680X or whatever is so widespread and common that you kind of wonder why they had the SV10, but that's a different story.
I mean, Beretta's product line is so interweaved with each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And product distinction is really difficult.
Yeah. So for all you Power Factor viewers, I think this is going to be a good episode, but I have a feeling that this episode will probably just take off like wildfire for all the rest of the people who are out there with these types of guns who are looking for resource information of how to disassemble them because, like I said, it's not been done.
No.
And for those of you who are checking this out for probably the first time, if you're interested, we went and did a series on the 680X disassembly, taking the stock off. So go back and look at that one here because we're starting from the standpoint that the stock is off and the action is out. But that episode also got into cleaning and maintenance and whatnot. And I think that was episodes 115 and 116, if I remember correctly. So go check those ones out if you haven't, and at least watch those before attempting this. Yeah, we're not going to put the don't try this at home, kids caveat on there. So
well, okay, yeah, try it and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not mechanically inclined, I would probably say let somebody else do this. But if you feel somewhat confident in your abilities, and after watching this video, you're going to assure us that this is pretty easy, right?
Well, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't.
Yeah, all right.
The reason that I got into inside the action of a 680 series is I bought a new shotgun, and it would not transfer barrels. Shoot the first barrel, and it wouldn't select the second barrel. And that really upset me a lot.
No, this is though you want to put a disclaimer on this with really light loads,
yeah,
right?
Really, basically a 28 gauge load out of a 12 gauge.
Right.
And I didn't want to pay $100 to ship it someplace and have them work on it for 3 weeks or whatever, and then pay to get it shipped back to me. So I started looking around at stuff, and one of the places I looked was on Shotgun World. And there's some good information on there, I'll say written instruction on how to get into one of these things, the order that you need to go through some things. But I was also hoping to find some kind of instructions with pictures, because I'm a visual kind of guy.
Same here.
And there's nothing on the Berettas out there. I went so far as to even call Brownells and talk with their service techs, and some of the publications that are allegedly tell you everything that's going on inside of a shotgun, and they couldn't find any written resource on Beretta 680 actions. I even asked on the Beretta forum, where they have the Beretta representative,
Clemente.
Clemente.
Yeah.
And he had nothing to offer other than go look at the schematics and you'll be able to figure out how the action works.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, that's what got me started. I was also asking about does a 692 use some of the same parts as the 680 series? He could not answer that question. He said, go look at part numbers. So I did all of that stuff. And the 692, the trigger group in it uses a lot of the same parts as the 680 series does. I found schematics. I found part numbers. I looked at, well, what's in this gun, what's in that gun. Okay, that's the same. So that helped. And then when I finally went into it, and we'll get into it in a minute here, is I took a lot of pictures.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah, which is really good.
And if you're going to do this, every step of the way, take a lot of pictures so you can see where everything is, do one step, take whatever that is out, lay it out, take another picture, and then do the next one, the next one, the next one. And you shouldn't have any trouble at all. The 680 action is really, I think, easy to work on. I think it's a pretty simple design when you get into it. But like a lot of simple designs, the execution gets to be complex. But
and it's also daunting. I mean, when you go into anything like this mechanical for the first time, especially a gun. However, 1911s are not so much. I mean, those are easy.
That's what I work on.
Well, I mean, diving into the design. But however, I will say there are a lot of people who are afraid to get beyond just a basic field strip on that. It's like, oh my God, I'm going into the, the guts of it and the sear. I'm not sure I can deal with that, and it's easy. But I will say in this, I'm not so certain I would. I mean, and probably until I see this, I would feel a lot more confident. But I'm not so sure I'd want to go diving into mine. So.
What, either I'm fearless, stupid, or what?
Well, I was going to say, in addition to your comment about Brownells, I wouldn't be surprised after we go and do this that possibly Brownells and or Beretta may want to take a look at this and possibly, put it on their sites as a reference. So.
Or Shotgun World.
Sure, no, it'll definitely end up on Shotgun World. I can say that much.
It'll, be like the 366 episode, which is all over the world now.
Right, yeah.
So, shall we
let's get into it. So again, we're starting from the standpoint here that we've already taken the action out of the stock. And if you're not familiar with that, go back and look at, I think it was 115 or 116 to get up to this point, and you'll be ready to go.
Okay, so this is the action out of my 686 Onyx. And it even says Onyx on it. And like as I was saying, the reason I got into one of these things is because the inertia system would not set the second barrel when I was attempting to shoot 3/4 ounce shots. So it does come apart real easily. Most of the pins, all but one of the pins in here, will push out without the need to use a hammer. And there are Loctited screws in this. Everything I read said the screw under the selector here would be Loctited in. On one of the guns that I have done, it has been. And they also said that the bottom screw here should come right out. One of the guns that I did, that was Loctited in, and I wound up using a heat gun and getting the whole receiver assembly up to over 300 degrees to break that loose. But it did break loose and come out. So anyway, let's get started. I got a couple of punches here and 3 screwdriver bits. And you should get the thin bits for working on European guns to work on these. And even at that, I had to grind down the width of a couple of these bits as well as the size across it to fit into the screw heads.
So that thin bit set you can actually get from Brownells. In fact, why don't you just go ahead
from Brownells?
Yeah, for anybody who works on shotguns, especially European shotguns, it's definitely something you're going to want to get.
080-120-000. Brownells will be happy to send you a box of these. So anyway, to start to take this apart, there is a pin that goes through the selector safety, and just push it out, and it doesn't make much difference on this receiver if it goes to the right or to the left. and it'll push out. And let me get it out of the way. All the way out. So there's one pin out. And then what you will do is lift this whole assembly out of the receiver. And that activates the safety as well as the barrel selector. And there is a screw underneath there, back here. And like I was saying, on some receivers, this is going to be Loctited in. And it's going to be really hard to get out. You're going to need to use some heat to get it. This one I have had out, and I did not put Loctite on it when I put it back together. Oh, way to go, John. So one screw out, and we want to take out the other screw that holds the trigger assembly to the receiver. And it has this little gold lock screw and then the screw itself. So
and don't lose that.
Yeah, don't lose that.
Yeah, be really careful when you pull that thing. You don't.
And this screw is in really tight. But it's coming out and cooperating very nicely. The one receiver I did, I had like 4 hours in getting this screw out of it. And this should just kind of lift out. So that is the trigger assembly, and this is the rest of the receiver. And you can take a look at it, and I would recommend that you do that, is take a look at how all these parts interact. And get an idea of how they work.
I also want to make a point here that before taking that assembly out, you want to make sure the hammers were cocked in the gun beforehand, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, because the hammers, if they were forward, they would overhang this ledge, which in the receiver itself, and wouldn't let the front of it drop down. So there are cocking rods in here, which go back and forth, and that's what cocks the hammers. There are cocking rod levers, which are these pieces back here, and you can see how they come up. And this surface will come up, and that's what lifts the front of the hammer up to cock it. I've seen on the forums where guys say one barrel will fire, the other won't. And sometimes it is a bent cocking rod, sometimes it can be a problem with this lever itself. And there's a spring under these guys to reset it. Just like in the firing pins, the bottom barrel, the top barrel, there's springs in there also. And I think that's all I want to play with on this part now. So here it is. So the first thing you need to do, what I would recommend you do is play with this thing a little bit. Take a look at how stuff works. This piece is the barrel selector, and what it really does is either go one side or the other, and there's levers in here which we'll get out in a minute. But the trigger will pick the back of the lever up to fire the first barrel, and then the inertia block should come back and release this lever, which will then set it for the second barrel, which is off of the front of the trigger. So I'll take the springs out. See, Steve?
Yep. Yeah. So, and people have commented before about having to replace hammer springs on the Berettas. And from my understanding, you can get these as a complete assembly from Kohl's, correct?
You can, but they're like $35 a pop.
Yeah.
So now the springs are out of it. Now you can really play with it and take a look at what these parts are doing. This is the back of one of the levers, that is sticking up, as is this one. This is the inertia block itself, which is on top of what they call the inertia rest. This they call the inertia lever out here. And when the hammers are cocked, then that sets the lever to block the rest. And so when you fire it, you can see that hammer popped up in the back of the lever popped up, but only, I don't know if you can see it, but only one of the sears is moving. So now when you let it go, the rest comes all the way forward, and there's a surface on the rest which pulls down both sears to release the second hammer. So you can see that there. We can get better pictures of this later if you want to look.
And when the gun fires, what happens is that's what basically causes that inertia block to go back and basically reset and select the next barrel.
So it should do that. Okay, and then the recoil will move the block back. That goes out of the way. The spring then drives the lever forward to let you do the second one. So let's start pushing pins. So the first one I'm going to push out of here is the pin that holds the lever in. And picking that right out, and the little hairspring that operates that.
Well, how is that oriented in there, or do you have it laying right now?
The
short leg forward or long leg forward?
Long leg is forward.
Okay.
And you want them
loop down or loop up.
Well, I gotta quit shaking for a second here. You want the loop up so that when it's in tension, you're squeezing them together, not pulling them apart. So that's one piece out. The hammer pin will go out either side, and the hammers should pretty much lift out. And the sears...
Matter which, keeping track of which side's which.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it'll only go back one way.
Right, yeah, I see that. Yep.
And then the sears are underneath it, and there is a spring underneath each of these, which I'm not going to take out. It's not that big a deal, but it's kind of a pain to put them back together. The next thing to push out is the hammer pin itself.
Let me ask you a quick question here. When people will get in the forum and ask a question and say, gee, my gun won't fire, it fires the lower barrel, won't fire the upper barrel anymore, and somebody else comes out and says it's probably because a particular spring is broken.
Yep.
Which spring is that, or is that little one there that you've already?
I think it's going to be this little guy more than the one that's inside here.
Okay.
But it could be either of them.
And those are the two springs that we're going after here after right now? Okay, I got it.
So I called this the hammer pin, but this is the trigger pin. So that's out. And you'll see that all of these pins are different sizes.
So you can't screw up and...
Well, you could try.
Well, yeah, it would take some effort.
But it should work for you. So now the trigger's flopping around, but the trigger won't come out because it's held in by what I would call a roll pin and what Beretta calls a spring pin. Now, I've just lifted both of the levers out, and the levers are they're directional. This little flat spot goes to the front, and they're also set up so that one is a right hand and one is a left hand by the cut at the back of it. And that is to allow the selector to move over to the right place. So now we got to get a hammer.
So it would probably be wise when somebody pulls these things apart to make sure they put those levers and separate them so you can't.
Well, at least take a real. Take a good look. Take one of them out and take a look at it. See what its orientation is. See where the bevel is, and That's a good idea too. When I first took one of these things apart, I laid everything out.
I was
the
going
way
to
that it came
yeah,
out,
I was going to say if it was
I
me,
took a picture of it.
if it was me, I would be laying these pins out basically in the order that I pulled them one by one, in a line or whatever, and these levers also somehow marking them right and left and so on and so forth.
So to get the inertia block itself and the rest out, there, and I just let one of the springs go for the sear, so we'll be taking those out. You need to drive this pin out, and I want to support whatever this is, this trigger block, whatever it is, when I do this. Oh, look, both of the springs came out from under the sears.
Those are the sears I saw, yeah.
So is that enough? Oh, no.
Is there anything anybody could have done to prevent that from happening?
Probably not. Okay, kids, here we go. It's got to go just a little more. I don't want to drive it all the way out because I don't want to have to start it.
And since it's a roll pin, yeah.
But it's got to go far enough to let it move around.
So that would be a caution to our viewers that when they're trying to remove this pin is don't knock it all the way. Since it's a roll pin,
I have knocked them out and gotten it back in, but it comes out so much easier. So here's the springs that were under the sears. So as long as we're in this far, here's the sears. And these, again, I think are identical and not marked right or left. And the sear pin.
However, I would say from, at least in terms of doing trigger jobs on 1911s, that it would probably be, the sears and the hammers and the hooks and the hammer are probably matched to the point that you would not want to interchange them.
Yeah.
Just to maintain
But
your
this thing
trigger
I'm
job,
not so
so
sure.
to speak.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So there's not much left in
Yeah, you've got
this
that housing completely apart, it looks like.
And the other spring that we want to get is the one that makes this go forward. And that is held in by this pin right here, which pops right out. And
So it looks like in that one, the long leg was
to the back.
to the back.
Yeah.
The other one was a long leg toward the front.
Yep. And I have done some work on this polishing stuff. You can see where the inertia block was rubbing on the trigger itself. It was pretty rough. So I polished the inside of it.
The inner channel in there is that what you're referring to? Okay.
Yeah, the inner channel. And on one of them that I did, you could see burrs down where the pivot point is, so I cleaned that up too. And on this piece, the lever, it had big casting burrs on it, so I cleaned that up too. I also polished the surfaces on them, the contact surfaces. And there's a little hook, which is really hard to see on this piece. And I got the Dremel out with the wheel on it, with the flits, and polished that up pretty good. And the surfaces, you can see them down here, the shiny surfaces are what contact the back of the sears when the second barrel fires. Doesn't matter if it's the first one or the second one. And the trigger pivots on this hole here. So the first barrel to fire, you have the selector It's either to the left or to the right. If it's over to the right, which means your selector was over to the left, it's going to pick up the lever on that side, and the back of the trigger is going to lift to make that one fire. And to fire the second one, this assembly is going to come down on the sears, and it's pulled down to fire the second barrel. So again, I just think it's a pretty simple design, but executed with a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
And as long as we're in here, this has some junk on it. So I have shot it since I've done this. So now it's probably time to try and put it back together.
So let's talk about springs for a minute. The springs that are standard in this are designed obviously for 12 gauge, and what you're going for here is trying to put a lighter spring in so that the inertia block selector doesn't have as much resistance, nor does the other spring, which controlled the, well, actually was the inertia lever as they call it. Yeah, the lever in the block. So what springs did you actually end up going with and selecting, and where did you get those at?
I got the springs from Brownells, and which is another interesting thing about Beretta. Beretta USA does not stock any parts. Brownells is their part supplier for their customer base. So in looking for the springs, Brownells was out of stock, and that's these little guys here. So I checked with Kohl's, because Kohl's has parts also. Mm-hmm. And
Kohl's is actually a warranty house for Beretta USA.
Yes. They are the ones that told me that Beretta gets all their product, or that Brownells gets all their product directly from Beretta USA, where Kohl's orders from Italy and gets their parts directly from Italy. So anyway, in the breakdowns, the parts breakdowns and the schematics that are available, they will identify 12 gauge springs, and then Beretta calls them all 4 gauges. And what I did is replace the 12 gauge springs with all 4 gauges. And these little tiny guys right here are the all gauges. And these are the 12 gauge springs that came out of that gun. And you can see they're just a little bit bigger by a bunch.
It may not show up on camera as much, but you can, yeah, they definitely are.
The wire diameter is a lot heavier, and they're just beefier all the way around.
So just for what it's worth, why don't you read the part numbers from the Brownell parts that you got?
The little straight looking guy is the lever spring is a 913-300-759. We'll probably take pictures of this stuff too. And the inertia block spring is 913-300-771. And the Beretta part numbers are one number apart. C54222, C54223. So, and they're really expensive. They're about $3.50 each.
That'll set you back. Yeah.
So, I bought every one they had, which wasn't that many.
So are you saying that Brownells doesn't have any more now?
Well, they get, they're like periodically.
Of course, that was months ago.
Yeah. So now comes the fun part.
And this is effectively, or is it your belief that if you sent your gun to Kohl's to have this done, because I've heard this before, that Kohl's will as a surface, or different manufacturers will, gunsmiths will as a surface, go and, get your gun so it will fire light loads for people who are having problems with that.
They talk about mechanical trigger conversions.
Right.
And my understanding is about the only place that does a true mechanical conversion on these actions was Kohler. Mm-hmm. And Kohler will only do it if you have their sub-gauge tubes now.
Oh, okay.
And it's like $350. Kohl's shows a mechanical conversion on these for like $130, which if you take into account, the cost of the expensive parts, $7.
Yeah.
And then labor, that probably comes real close to like $130.
Right.
To take it apart, replace it, take a look at these pieces, polish up what needs to be polished up. I'm thinking they might do something with the contact surface between the lever and the rest to allow it to pull out from under the hook easier.
Right.
And, polish those things
This is
up.
looking a bit like what we would call the trigger job.
Yeah.
I mean, effectively, just doing a
And
polish.
it's,
But what you found after that you were done with this is that just simply dropping the hammer alone, the hammer drop, was enough effective recoil, so to speak, that it actually resets the sear block, or sorry, the inertia block. Right.
all three that I've done, one of them will do it consistently, like every time. The other two are pretty much. But the springs are so light, it has not failed to fire the second barrel on a 3/4 ounce load since I have done it.